For this one, I want to bring on Henry from Privy to tell you about what it means to actually make things super easy and friendly for everybody to use in the world of wallets and integrating that experience into any application that you can think of. You may have already used Privy without even knowing it. So we'll get into how and when and where with Henry directly. So please welcome him on stage. Thanks for being here, Henry. Hello, hello. There we go. There's a good chance that people have used Privy already in the last few months here in this audience. But what I want to do is, before we get to where, I want to kind of have you sort of talk about how Privy started and what was the early version of this and where are you now?
So it's fun to speak here right after Juan, because the early version of this for me starts at Protocol Labs, where I worked basically for a long time before starting Privy. So I came into crypto through cryptography proper, and I got pitched by Juan, why don't you come and do research here instead of trying to get a doctorate? And you can do fundamental research in a space that actually ships products, which felt like a very good deal. And so the Bell Labs pipeline is a very effective,
the model works.
It's a very effective pitch, I think, for prospective candidates who want to go into research but want to also like ship product. And I think the honest answer is I worked on Filecoin for a long time, and I got very excited about a lot of the ownership primitives behind this and about the notion of Web3 beyond crypto. And I guess I'm making a distinction here between financial infrastructure and decentralized infrastructure to balance ledgers, and decentralized infrastructure that enables user data and user assets to be controlled by users in a deeper way. But I think in working on a very sort of research minded part of the stack and on consensus, I got a bit frustrated with how far I felt I was from end user applications. And it struck me that if you look at the core development of meaningful technologies, they are built in the place where user need meets new protocols and new technologies. And so like, I am kind of stuck on the idea of like, what if AWS had been built by JP Morgan rather than a bookseller? How different would the cloud look today? And
we closed on the weekends.
Between Fidelity, their trading arm on crypto is closed outside of business hours, which is very fun. But yeah, so I think that's what got me into it, which is I really believe in the space. I'm extraordinarily excited by what these decentralized primitives can make work, but it will only impact mainstream users' lives if we make it easier for it to reach mainstream users in the first place. And in order to do that, we need to abstract away a lot of this complexity for builders so they can feel focused on building good products, but products that make use of this infrastructure to begin with. So there's a very high level, why we got into this. Yeah.
What was the V1 of Privy?
Yeah, so V1 was, I think our core take was maybe having worked on consensus for a while, consensus is extremely expensive. Getting nodes to agree on the state of the world, especially complex state, requires resources. That's why God invented tokens. And that coordination is not necessary for everything. It's only necessary for things that must be trustless or verifiable by definition. And so I think our take was, if this stack is to work on a large scale, the great products that'll come out of it will be hybrid products that marry on-chain data and off-chain data very well together. And the privacy implications of putting user data on-chain, which we must, if we are to build user-facing applications, are absolutely horrendous. And so I think the question for us was, how do we build a stack that makes it easier for developers to basically marry on-chain and off-chain systems in the right ways? It started off basically as a privacy-preserving data store, a way to associate real-world data to wallet addresses off-chain. And very quickly, basically, onboarding as a core problem got pulled out of us by our early customers who were basically using us to associate, email addresses, phone numbers, other wallets to one another, and trying to basically get an understanding of who's actually using this so I can build an experience around them. And so that led us to the form of the product today.
And kind of just jumping right in, what is the product today? And I'll kind of reveal the answer. What is an embedded wallet?
Yeah, so we see Privy basically as a user management and onboarding kit. It's a tool set that enables developers to onboard any user, regardless of how familiar they are with crypto or not. So it brings together wallet connectors to bring on folks who are coming in with their own consumer wallets, know exactly what they want to do with the product, have the level of control and the expertise they need to select which chain they want to go on, tune their gas prices, et cetera, et cetera. And it gives developers these embedded wallets, which allows them to sort of abstract away the key management system from the user, enables them to bring on users in a way that's familiar to them through, SMS, email, social logins, and basically creates this self-custodial abstraction on top of a key signature system that both keeps the developer away from any cryptographic materials, keeps the user away from any cryptographic materials that they know of, but gives them basically access to keys that they are the sole party to control. So an embedded wallet basically is a system whereby you can log into an app with an email, keys are provisioned on your behalf, and those keys can be used to take on-chain actions for you as you interact with the app.
One thing you've kind of brought up a few times is just kind of mirroring the Web 2 and or rather just centralized and decentralized aspects of this tech. So in the case of the embedded wallets that developers are using, what parts do they have a higher confidence in on are just not being fully or are just actually just tamper-proof, or they have confidence that like you can affect that as a centralized service, or they get to still be true to the values of the Web3 ecosystem they're building on top of? How do you kind of help them reason about using these wallets instead of just kind of having people get a MetaMask account or forcing them to install another app to kind of do all these things?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm going to give you maybe annoyingly nuanced answer.
Well, maybe we'll see.
I think we have to distinguish across sort of three things that are not the same, even though they are often bundled together. Decentralization, security, and custody. And there are moments in which they're aligned, and having a more decentralized system makes it more robust to certain attacks. And there are moments in which they are opposed in, for example, having users custody private keys often creates security risk because these users will, put their keys in LastPass, for instance.
Let's forget, or
forget, which is a UX issue. So that's maybe the fourth one. So I think for us, we've always kind of taken a non-religious view on this, which is our main goal is user empowerment through two things. One, self-custody. The user must be the only party in control of the keys. Developers can be granted permissions to take certain actions on behalf of users when users are present and willing, but the user is the only party who ultimately has control over whether something gets done and always has the ability to yank that something out of the system if they don't like it. The second one is interoperability. These assets and these systems must be able to work across the apps in an ecosystem. Otherwise, you might wonder, what is it good for?
And in this case, are we talking about the identity of that user or something else?
Both the identity and the EOA or signer that they're using to custody the assets themselves. So I think for us, we looked at this, and then we looked at UX constraints. And I think the question, we looked at early models of how do we decentralize this? And there are really great companies doing work here, by the way, that I think we're very excited to integrate with in time, but folks like Lit or Entropy, these sort of decentralized MPC networks. And I think we came to the point of user control is what we're optimizing for rather than decentralization. And in order to ensure proper user control, we must split keys in such a way that no one but the user ever has access to a reassembled key set. And we must give the user the means of sort of having an escape hatch so that if things are ever not the way that they like, we understand there are limitations to what embedded wallets can do. And I'll give an example here. Embedded wallets enable the developer to set the network that the user's on. So the awesome UX advantage is you don't have to switch network when you connect to an app. You're already in Base or you're already in Arbitrum. And the notion of a chain itself is abstracted away from the user. The downside is if I send mainnet ETH to that app, it's stuck. And so we've improved the UX, but at a cost of basically user control to some extent here. And I think our take was there are too many apps to be built and too many users at different points in the spectrum. We need to make sure that there's an escape hatch so that users, if they ever find themselves in a UX hole because of the pathways that the app has built, can always eject and come back to what is, I think, a very good point in the design space, the consumer wallet. So I think it's a different point in the trade-off space that is being made, but it's a very good one. Yeah, happy to talk more about the architecture of embedded wallets if that's useful. But
actually, well, I do want to tackle that, but maybe in a few minutes. one thing that you kind of also talked about was, well, you kind of noticed that people are not using these readily at scale, and partially that's just frustrations around making that not easy of an interaction, given how things are right now, and partially it's like maybe we don't have an obvious thing that we can use it for day to day. Obviously, costs and transaction fees are all these factors, but the goal here is that effectively, with an integrated wallet, you are increasing the odds of people using this app and having them not worry about what's happening behind the scenes. And that's kind of why I feel like one of the factors we need to enable more consumer crypto. So the question I have is like, how do you define what consumer crypto is? And I'll kind of put you on the spot by kind of having you maybe speak on behalf of some of your customers. Like, who are they? How do they kind of perceive this space? And how do you sort of think about their success as it relates to kind of what you are able to offer in that abstraction process?
So I certainly can't speak on their behalf, but I'll speak on my behalf as an admirer.
As a spectator of your customer.
I think we made an early decision that was a really good one, which was to build on both ends of the extreme. We spend an inordinate amount of time building very good wallet connectors so that, in that case where you're an Android user using Firefox and you open up an app and you have to connect your MetaMask, but you were just last on Coinbase, connected to the site on another tab, and you click the button and it says connect, and you switch tabs, and then you switch back. Every now and then the deep link doesn't fire, so you have to switch back manually, and then you click sign, and then that user must be served, and that user must be served properly, where the developers are ripping out their hair about basically the bug reports that they're getting on this. And we were like, should we take this on? And the answer for us was absolutely, because I think the most sort of forward crypto users show us the way in terms of what can only be built on crypto rails. Because if we're only talking to folks who want to hide crypto altogether, then the best way to hide crypto is to not build using crypto at all. And you end up with basically these crypto marketing apps where I'll drop you an NFT. What is the NFT good for? Nothing, but there's crypto involved and it's really cool. And it'll be the project that a chief innovation officer at a company that isn't actually that invested in understanding what do open systems give us will get. And so I think our take early on was we need to straddle both because that'll make our product better. And we need to make sure that the object we give back to the developer when a user logs in is the same regardless of how the user is logging in. And so that's kind of the mantra, user's a user, and then we follow the developers where they go. I'll give you a few examples, but basically along the spectrum, you have apps. One of them that I really like is an app called Blackbird, and Blackbird is building a restaurant loyalty program. It was built by a fellow called Ben Leventhal, who built before that Eater and Resi. And we get very excited when these basically industry insiders who really know their space.
There's a very popular app too.
Yeah. And really know consumer as well, are interested in decentralization and are interested in understanding what does basically ecosystem network effects that this gives us, what can they bring to a product? And so the sort of leading indicator for us is how many Bens can we get who comes up and tries to build in crypto, but doesn't end up breaking their teeth so much on the tech itself that they're like, you know what, it wasn't worth it. We'll just build this as a centralized product. So that's one end of the spectrum. In the other side of the spectrum, we have a customer like Hyperliquid, which is building basically a derivatives and perps trading platform Onchain. Very Web3 native, extremely technical crowd who's engaging with basically price action across chains, and a very different set of needs. And then maybe in the middle, you've got folks like Zora, who are making it easier to create and build on chain, sort of unlocking, artist imaginations to actually mint things that much quicker. You've got folks like Courtyard who are translating, again, real world assets on chain with Pokemon card trading and the like. And you've got, folks like Frentech who are building sort of social applications. And I think basically when we look at these, our question is, how well is their core customer served? Does the person who intends to join the app, are they able to do it in the way that feels natural to them? And can they do it in fewer than, 5 taps? And then the second is, what is the ratio of monthly active users to monthly transacting users for these apps? And how quickly can they get to a first transaction?
I think that's a really interesting metric too. And yeah, that's super helpful. I mean, I've used a bunch of those apps already that you just mentioned, and the fact that they're just being abstracted away in an easy environment, thanks to Privy, is actually kind of awesome. And really puts the embedded wallet here that you wouldn't know otherwise. I had a question, but I think I should skip that because I want to talk about something that I said we promised we would, which is understanding now not just the identity, but the data parts too. So you said that the V1 of Privy was being able to have data associated with an address so people can kind of query it. And I think just a few days ago, or maybe last week, you announced the global embedded wallets. What is that? What's kind of the goal here, and what will be the possibilities of this?
Yeah, so we want to be very concrete. I think, tooling spawns the apps that it enables. And so we wanted to make sure that we opened up the aperture for builders who want their users coming in for the product itself, not for the crypto of it potentially, to have an easier time. And so we started with, there are two superpowers that crypto gives you. I would say one is self-custody. The user's in control, the user's in charge. It is my assets, it is my keys, and I decide what happens with them. And the second one is interoperability. These assets, as they are composable, are reusable across apps, and we can sort of let 1,000 flowers bloom. This dates me a little bit, but I think one of the more exciting things that I still am a firm, I hope someone reignites action around Loot, which was a project where you had 6 words and you could do whatever you wanted with the words, and 1,000 people were building various applications on top of it, and that seems like a core superpower. We tackled self-custody first. How do we make self-custody simpler? How do we make sure that we can build embedded wallet systems that scale, that are highly performant, and in which only the user is in control? And with that done, so very much a work in progress, but we feel like the UX is good enough,
stable enough,
security is good enough that we went live with a fully open product a few weeks ago, even though before that you had to talk to us to get access. With that done, then the question is, how do we make sure that users can reuse these assets across different apps that they connect to? So this means...
What's an asset in this case?
I'll use Blackbird as an example, or maybe I'll use POAP as an example. So POAP is a customer, they give you a proof of attendance sort of token that you went to an event. Maybe I got my POAP for Pragma, and maybe there's a collaboration between Pragma and Blackbird that POAP is not involved in at all. But basically, I'm able to use the system with which I maybe tagged into the Pragma event in order to get a free drink at a restaurant that I go to next, or in order to unlock access to an investment opportunity on a trading app elsewhere, and basically making sure that these assets can follow users around easily from app to app to app without them having to explicitly connect these different app accounts together is really, really important.
So is the key insight here that these assets or this data here is a collection of on-chain and off-chain things? Because in the case of POAPs, I know I have the NFT, so even if I don't have any direct connections, I can still say, hey, this is my address, this is the NFT I own, and I still don't need permission. But if I wanted to say this is the NFT and this is my personal address associated with it to get some coupon, then you need that context to be passed on to the next thing.
Yeah, and I think how easy you make things ends up being a major part of whether or not it gets done. It is theoretically possible to do that today with Privy.
It's more about just understanding, is it just on-chain assets only, or is it...
I understand. To start, it's on-chain assets, because that's where I think there is the clearest value for building that interoperability across apps. As we look forward, things like KYC, we spent an inordinate amount of time early on looking at, what is PII that people would be interested in having carry over from app to app to app, and KYC data is one of them. A lot of these systems are regulated, require KYC on behalf of their customers. Having to take, 18 photos of your passport with like a handwritten note is a major pain in the ass. And being able to associate that data, not just to a given wallet address, but to given user address or user object is extraordinarily important. So I think it goes far beyond on-chain data, but we're clearly starting with on-chain data because that is where there is the clearest and most present use case.
Oh, it's awesome. And kind of may open a can of worms here, but so far we just kind of talked about the web. What about mobile here?
Yeah, so someone on the team was talking about, so we have to be concrete, we have a React Native SDK, we have a Swift SDK that we don't talk about, but that exists. And we are working on a Kotlin SDK. And the reality is, this is also where PWAs have been very interesting as an easy way of getting users back on. So mobile has probably 3 great things going for it. One, it is sticky. You don't need to re-navigate to the website. It is there, hopefully on your home screen, hopefully in your dock, but at any event, it's here and it's here. 2, it is push-based rather than pull-based. apps suffer a ton from having to have the user remember to come on and see what happened. It's especially true in crypto because, settlement layers on chain take time. And so my transaction's pending and I'm going to click away because I don't want to look at a screen for, 20 seconds to 2 minutes. And I'm going to forget to come back very often. So being able to push things to users, push notifications are a major unlock. And then finally, I think it's mostly the screen where users spend the most of their time. So we talk a lot, and this is a circa maybe 2010s thing. It was like SOLO-MO, social, local, mobile. And I think this is part of what I'm very excited about coming into 2024. We're seeing a pace of activity around experimentation in consumer-facing apps that we just haven't seen in crypto, at least as I've been here.
We're waiting on so much of that abstraction on scalability that I think we're kind of at that point where you can.
Exactly. And so seeing, we had the day we launched our self-serve, we had an app go from signing up to prod in, I think, 40 hours with a fully built end-to-end product that worked on mobile. And that felt
awesome,
exceedingly exciting to us, which is you no longer need a team of 15, including 3 PhDs and a cryptographer in order to build something.
For an app sole approval.
That too.
Wow. Well, maybe just to kind of end this as a final question, what are you excited about in terms of kind of the next product updates or things that you're tackling, or just harder problems that you think are worth abstracting? And what can we look forward to the next few months for Privy?
So I think our work comes into like really 3 parts. The first is global wallets and basically launching easier means of interop for users where they can decide whether they want to create sort of fresh identities as they come into apps or reuse the ones that they've sort of been collecting before. The second is basically on-ramping and funding of accounts. This MAU-MTU ratio, I think, remains now one of the sort of key things that's holding back crypto. So things like being able to sponsor gas. And the idea that users would have to pay for their own infrastructure is insane in a world in which the cloud exists, basically.
We would like it to go away.
Yeah. And so I think there's a lot of run-on effects in terms of, what do on-chain business models have to look like in order for it to be worthwhile for developers to sponsor gas on behalf of their users. But things like gas sponsorship, things like better on-ramps is a major part of the work that we're doing. How do we get a user to their first transaction, and how do we fund these wallets more easily? And then basically the third is really broadening the funnel with more clients, so SDKs that enable people to build in environments that their users are native to, and more chains, moving beyond the EVM as well to unlock those environments.
Awesome. Well, Henry, thank you so much for that amazing conversation, and can't wait to see more embedded wallets everywhere. They're ideal on Privy. So
thank you.